Hello, and welcome to the Pitt Mailbag Show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with my friend and co-host, Stephen Thompson. We're your Pitt beat writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As always, you can find our written work at post-gazette.com. Find this show every Tuesday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube when you search Post-Gazette Sports, along with the Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast. And as always, the show is brought to you by the best bar of Pittsburgh, and that's Mike's Beer Bar. Mike's Beer Bar has over 500 different available beers, 300 of those beers from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. It's the best bar of Pittsburgh. Go there to experience amazing food, amazing sights, and amazing time out in the North Shore. All right, Stephen, we got questions to get into. We've been through kind of the first week of training camp. We just saw practice number 5 on Monday. There's a lot of excitement building up. The season itself is less than a month away. How excited are you, Stephen, to get things going?
I'm really excited. I think you kind of go through the summer months and you almost forget what football looks like. You just don't watch it for so long. And I found myself getting hyped up for like the Hall of Fame game and, the first week of the preseason, things that I could not have cared less about, a couple weeks ago, a couple, months ago, or whatever. I was not looking forward to it at all. But now I just need football in my life. I need some real pads on pads. We saw Pitt put on some pads earlier this week. So I'm really excited just to see it all kind of come back and to see something get put together on the field, see some real football for once.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some real football and what Pitt's building up to right now. Howie asks, is there a quarterback competition going on in camp at all, or is this the depth chart is the depth chart pretty much set so far this year? Stephen, Pat Narduzzi kind of acknowledged what the quarterback situation was as far as who's where and what's the competition. But realistically, this is Nate Yarnell's team until otherwise, right?
Yeah, I think so. We've talked to Pat Narduzzi now 3 times since training camp started, I believe, and he's been asked about the quarterbacks in 2 of those sessions. His first answer, he was asked pretty point blank, is there a quarterback competition? Today he was asked, how's the competition going? His first answer was, yeah, there's competition. There's competition everywhere. And then today he kind of talked a little bit more in detail about the competition for the 3rd string quarterback job than he did the 1st or the 2nd string. Both those answers kind of lead me to believe that he is pretty set on quarterbacks 1 and 2 and the order in which they sit in. This is Nate Yarnell's job to lose. And quite frankly, I'd be really stunned if he does anything to lose it before week 1 of this season. And I'd be even, I'd still be pretty shocked if he does anything at any point this season that warrants him losing the job. I think, even if the offense underperforms, Nate, it's just hard for me to envision that Nate Yarnell turns the ball over enough or makes enough poor decisions in order to warrant him losing the job. So in training camp, I think that'd be really hard to do. I think Eli Holstein is a really good backup. I think he has a really bright future, but I think that's all he is for right now and is just a backup.
I think that's the situation Pitt's in right now. Pitt needs a quarterback that can get them on schedule, be on time, and to me, that's been Nate Yarnell's strength. He even though this is a new offense and everyone's kind of getting used to it at the same time, Nate Yarnell's whole thing last year was that he was the best of the 3 quarterbacks that we saw at knowing where the ball was supposed to be, making it accurate, and playing within it. The Pitt needs a game manager quarterback. I know that's not the sexy term that everyone likes to hear. Everyone says, "Oh no, a game manager." Game manager quarterbacks in college are very, very valuable. They keep you on time. They allow your offense to operate at its full capacity. There's a lot of good things going on there if you have one, and I think that's what Pitt's looking for in Nate Yarnell. I think he can be that this year. So I think a guy like Holstein, they're happy to help him develop and bring him along, and maybe he's the next guy. But right now, Nate Yarnell's the guy. Everyone else after that is kind of competing for 3rd. And I think that's going to be interesting. How will Julian Duggar figure in things? Diefenbach, other David Lynch, all those guys. That's the stuff I think that actually might get worked out in camp. But the things that are pretty solidified right now: Nate Yarnell's number 1, Eli Holstein's number 2, and everyone else is fighting for 3rd. That's the depth chart.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up the game manager thing. I think we had this conversation in the facility the other day, but like Nate Peterman was not anything more than a game manager, but he piloted one of the best offenses that this program has ever seen because he was smart with the football. He didn't throw a ton of picks, didn't turn the ball over, and he leaned on some really fantastic playmakers that he had around him. And Nate Peterman did not have a spectacular career at Pitt, but he won a bunch of games because he had all those smarts. He had the intelligence, knew how to run the offense. And if Pitt had a game manager last year, they're probably in a lot better position than 3-9. I'll say that much.
Absolutely. Let's talk about records because we have a friend, Doug, who has up on Twitter said, what are the odds on Pitt football getting 7 wins this season? So, Steven, I mean, technically, I guess we're being asked by Doug here, what are the odds for that? I wasn't able to get official Vegas odds on this, but I did go to FanDuel right away. And the over-under for Pitt's wins right now is set at 5.5. The favorite here is under 5.5 wins. It's minus 128, and it's plus 104 if you say over 5.5 wins. But Steven, we can look at this schedule. We can parse it out week by week. Do you think the over-under should be a little bit higher to maybe be at 6.5 wins?
No, honestly, I think 5 is pretty close to exactly where it should be. You think about the first 4 weeks of the season, you get teams like Youngstown State and Kent State. You even get a Cincinnati team that I think is not going to be spectacular. I mean, they weren't very good last year. I know Pitt lost to them, but it was a game that I thought Pitt probably should have won. So I think those are 3. Those are 3 at worst 50-50 shots. But Kent State and Youngstown State should be wins. I think about teams like Virginia and Boston College; those should also be wins. But then things start to get a little more dicey. I think West Virginia, I don't really know what to make of that game. Rivalry games are always weird. I think Syracuse in a rebuilding year with a new head coach is going to be interesting. They have a lot of incoming transfer talent, but will that play right away? Cal's interesting. They're kind of right on the edge of bowl eligibility. So there are a lot of ways for Pitt to pick up, those kind of extra 6th or 7th wins. I could see 5 that I would be pretty confident saying Pitt's definitely going to get this year. But beyond that, it's pretty tough to say. I still think, they're also going to be in line to pull a pretty stunning upset over, Clemson or Louisville or maybe even SMU, depending on the kind of season they have. Pitt's going to have one of those games that they have every year where they just kind of pull a rabbit out of a hat when no one's looking at them. So I would say at least 6. I'm kind of, looking at them to get 6 wins, kind of right on the edge of bowl eligibility. But I don't think that win total line at 5.5 is unfair at all. I think it's pretty spot on. I could see them kind of swinging, in either direction by a couple games, but I like that number for them. I think that's a good goal too.
Oftentimes I find that national picks or lines that are set don't reflect what the local beats are saying. But I think the thing is that we don't know what Pitt's going to look like here on the local beat here. We're still asking those questions ourselves. That's why we're at training camp. That's why Stevens is going to be there all week long. I've got to sprint out to Latrobe on a few days, but I was there Monday. I'll be back again Friday. So I think that's the bottom line here is I think that they can get 7 wins. I think there's a path there, but it's going to require work. It's going to require consistency. It's going to require young guys stepping into roles that weren't solidified and I'd even say several young guys stepping into roles that they weren't solidified in last year. Guys like Rylan Gandy at cornerback, guys like Jordan Bass at linebacker, or Braylon Lovelace or Kyle Lewis or Rasheem Biles, guys like Nikai Johnson at defensive tackle, guys like Kenny Johnson at wide receiver. And even though we saw a little bit of him, we didn't see a whole lot of him making plays in the offense because the offense was just that bad. And you can go down the line. There's several other players that I could bring up there, but bottom line is Pitt has a lot to prove. Getting to 7 wins, usually that comes from success. So, on that note, I think that, can they get there? Yes. But do I think they should be favored to get there? No. I think that they have to prove it. And when there's something that's unproven, that's when I look away from something being favored.
Yeah. And, Pitt is just not one of those schools that it's going to earn any kind of optimism just based off their name brand. I think Pat Narduzzi's proven to kind of bring this, to have brought this program to a pretty high floor. But, after 3-9, I think everyone's feeling like all bets are off and you can't really, put a very serious, floor on what this team can be because I don't know, they could bounce back and become, the team that we always thought they've been for most of Narduzzi's tenure, or, it's not hard to imagine them falling back down into 3 or 4 wins either. There's a pretty wide range of outcomes either way.
Let's move on to Nick's question, and is Bam Brima's a big loss for Pitt's defensive line? Stephen Bam Brima, of course, was announced to no longer be with the team Monday morning when we were at Pitt practice. We tweeted that out right away. Pat Narduzzi acknowledging that he's graduated and that he's no longer with the team. Bam Brima was going to be a 6-year defensive lineman. Him and Nate Temple were going to kind of be the holdovers. Nate Temple, though, I believe is out for the season with an injury, and Bam Brima is now no longer with the team, so both of those guys aren't there before. But Bam Brima was supposed to move inside for being an edge rusher or a defensive end last year. And Steven, I don't think it's that big of a deal because I don't think Bam was ever really going to be a big part of the picture this year. I think he was going to be a reserve guy, if anything else. And, it's always, unfortunate to see a guy not finish his time with Pitt, when he has a year left on his experience, on his, resume or whatever. But I think that, the kind of answer is that Pitt's got a lot of young guys on their defense, especially if he's moving inside. Guys like Jasir Whittington, guys like Isaiah Neal, guys like Francis Brew. Like, Bam Brima is not going to take away snaps from those guys. And, I think that's kind of just where Pitt is right now.
Yeah, I mean, Brima had a pretty good year last year, but I think that was a lot of, volume, quite honestly. I think he played more games, more snaps than he ever has in his career. And still, it was 3 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, 31 tackles. I mean, not exactly a huge loss, especially in a down year. I feel like this is a position group that is kind of rebuilding and reloading, trying to reinvent itself a little bit. And Bam, I just don't think really fit into that plan, I guess, that timeline. I think you hit it square on the head. I mean, whether it was defensive end or whether it was defensive tackle, he's played both during his career here. I can't really think of many guys that I'm like, Bam Brima is definitely better than them. And I think even at this point in kind of Pitt's timeline and given where they're at, you would rather, give a guy like Sincere Edwards some more time. Give a guy like Jimmy Scott, who's shown some explosive playability, some time at defensive end. Or you would go with, some more athletic guys on the defensive tackle spot, like, a Sean Fitzsimmons or a Nakai Johnson or even a Francis Brew. So I just think there were better, younger options in there. Like you said, it's unfortunate that Bam didn't, finish his time out at Pitt. But, I don't think Pitt is really going to suffer a whole lot from this loss. I think they've got enough in that room to kind of recover, to fill those gaps. And I think they're going to be just fine on the defensive line. I think I talked last week about how I'm pretty optimistic on what they can be this year, especially at the defensive tackle spot. And Brima leaving doesn't really change much for me.
I'm right with you there. Last question comes from Frederick, who asks, how will Pitt use its running backs in Kade Bell's offense? Will there be a bell cow back? Now, of course, a bell cow back person running the primary running back that's getting a bulk of the carries where everyone else kind of splits, a much smaller amount. I don't think there's going to be a bell cow back in this offense, Steven. I think that they're going to split the reps, especially when you have an offense that's supposed to be up-tempo. It's supposed to be fast-paced like Kade Bell's is. You're going to see these running backs being asked to do a lot, go in motion a lot, line up at receiver a lot, catch the ball, run the ball, take hits, and then get in and out. I think that'll lead to these guys kind of sharing the load a little bit. And I think the question isn't who's going to be the bell cow. It's going to be probably who's the top 3 guys that Pitt relies upon, and what's the lion's share of those top 3 when you look at it. If I'm looking at three guys, I'm looking at Rodey Hammond because he's been the guy that they've been trying to develop. Desmond Reed, the guy they brought in from Western Carolina, who knows Kade Bell's offense. And I'd be looking at Derek Davis, to be honest, because I think his speed is something to behold. And I've liked seeing how fast he's moved, but I wouldn't be shocked because guys like Montravius Lloyd and Jules Goff, they're also fast guys. And I think that might be what Kade Bell's opting for in this offense.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think it's going to be a little bit more by committee. If you made me pick who I think the top dog is kind of going to be, like who the coaching staff thinks the best running back of the group is, I'm willing to bet that they think Desmond Reed is kind of the best of the bunch right now. I think we have heard nothing but good things about him throughout spring ball ever since he arrived in Pittsburgh a few months ago. So I think the coaching staff's really enamored with him. I think if they could, they would let him take every carry. But like you said, an up-tempo offense like this, I think they're going to want to give Rodey Hammond the ball quite a bit. I expect it'll be kind of more of a I don't know, I guess like 60-40 split. Honestly, I think Reed is going to take most of the carries, not, necessarily that large of a share of them. Hammond's definitely going to be involved, but like you said, I think they're going to give Derek Davis a look kind of for really the first time in his career. As a running back, he came to Pitt after transferring from defensive back to running back, so he's got some kind of catching up to do. But I think then you also throw some snaps in there for Daniel Card every once in a while, just because they like his experience, and he's kind of been there and done that as well. He's a little bit bigger, could be, a short yardage back. So I think there'll be a lot of snaps to go around, and I think they're really going to spread the love. I don't think there's going to be, kind of one guy who's, like you said, is being the bell cow, carrying, 70+% of the snaps throughout this season.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I think this is going to be very much a group project, running back by committee, if you will, where Pitt football kind of carries the load, together more so than trying to pit it on one guy. There's no Israel Abanikanda on this team that I think that is going to do. And that's not to say that someone might not emerge and be very impressive, but I think just with the nature of this offense, you're going to be sharing the ball around a lot. That's your Pitt Mailbag Show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette from Chris Carter and Stephen Thompson. Thanks so much for joining us here. Remember, we're here every Tuesday taking your questions. You can submit via email or at us on Twitter. Be sure to hit us up with those questions before the show on Monday so that we can try to work them in here. We'll be back next week after another week of Pitt training camp is in the books, and we get ever so close to the season opener, August 31st at Acrisure Stadium against Kent State. We'll see you here on the Pitt Mailbag Show from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.